So hi Lisa, thank you so much for talking to me and also for sharing your story about Francesca and her journey with feeding and paediatric feeding disorder. It's really helpful and it'd be really brilliant for other parents to hear. So thank you so much for that. I just wondered if you wanted to start off just a little bit about your story and Francesca's story, and just how did you kind of first understand, or how did you first realise that Francesca might have issue with feeding or a feeding disorder?
Yeah, hi Hannah, thanks for having me along. And I'm Lisa. My daughter is Francesca. She is 7, nearly 8. She was born by C-section. She was only 5.5 pounds born. So first noticed issues with the feeding because she was very small. I remember the midwife saying, you must wake her every 3 hours to feed her. And that was always a struggle early on. Always a really, really good baby, no issues, slept really well. I thought I was absolutely on it as far as a mom went, like, oh, I'm going to run upstairs, put her down for a nap. She went for a nap, but it was always the feeding. It was struggling. So I couldn't breastfeed. So that wasn't even an option because I was a bit poorly after I had her. So it was bottle feeding, but she struggled with that sucking of the bottle. She never looked like she enjoyed drinking her milk, although she never, had issues or severe colic or anything. Then I went on to weaning and she was fine with little bits of pureed food and still was drinking the milk. And it was just when I started going on to that, a little bit older, about 8-9 months, of start giving her some more lumpy textured foods, and she really struggled with that. She started gagging, she started being sick, she would just hold food in her mouth for long periods of time. But also at that point she couldn't hold herself up because she was still quite small and she was lower on the centile, I forgot how you say it now, in the red book.
Growth
She
chart.
was always very small. Yeah, the growth chart. So it was, at that point she couldn't hold herself up, so she would be tiny in this little high chair. And now looking back, they start talking about, actually, until babies hold up their core strength, that's the point where you're meant to start feeding them and giving them more solid food. So yeah, notice when she was smaller, holding foods in her mouth, choking, being sick. And then I just felt like she was forever sitting in the high chair to eat little bits of food, and she would either swallow them eventually after a long period of time or was sick. So yeah, that was when I first noticed problems.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. It's really interesting that it was kind of like you noticed something from so early on. I think that's really interesting. So just going on a little bit further, obviously, how did you kind of seek help, or how was Francesca diagnosed with PFD, or with her feeding difficulties?
Yeah, so went a little bit further that people would say to me it's because she's your first and you don't really know. But my mum and my nan used to help me with her as well, and they'd had kids and everybody else's kids, and they started really saying something is wrong. Went to the GP, went to the health visitor to get some advice. They're like, oh, this is medical, we can't help. There's definitely a medical issue going on. Made me really quite frightened. She's my only daughter. The GP said, have you heard of a web that, some children get a web in their throat that can cause her to be struggling to swallow? We'll put you on the waiting list to go and have the camera put down. And that was about an 8-month waiting list. And I'm ringing up saying, my baby's not eating, please help me. Also not meeting her developmental milestones, which was making me worry. And I kept thinking, it's because she's sitting in the high chair all day or asleep. And then I paid privately to go and see a consultant, and within a week I got seen at the children's. They put the camera down, they put her to sleep, and they diagnosed that she'd got a lot of stomach acid that was burning her throat. So then it was, that is causing her the problems when she's eating. So then we started putting Gaviscon in her milk, which still didn't really help, to be honest. So as time went on, she did start eating, didn't get any support. The health visitor would come to the house and say she hasn't learned the technique to chew. And then it was, time went on. Anyway, she didn't meet milestones of walking, didn't walk till she was about 18 months old. and still just drinking a lot of milk. And I was always worried to drop that milk. But yeah, so we went on further. As she got older, she would eat the same sort of food. So even though I cooked healthy food, she wouldn't eat them, tried lots of things, finger foods, wouldn't eat them. She would always go towards 7-month-old baby Heinz pasta stars, I think they were called. And then it became that every night she'd eat that. And I think every morning she'd eat like a banana pouch from Aldi that I'd have to go and hunt them down. So always had this regular thing of eating, and that went from a few different things over the years. Anyway, race forward, I'm thinking she's autistic, she's under the umbrella pathway, specialist play services, and we went into lockdown. But at 5, I remember going on, at 4, I remember going online and talking to another parent, and they hadn't got the same difficulties, but read a lot online and said, have you ever heard of ARFID? And put it on my radar. And I was like, oh my God, it all just ticked the boxes. So obviously we was under dietitians. They were useless as far as it came to Francesca. The things that they recommended us trying didn't help, made Francesca even more overwhelmed about eating. So it was like, you must do this with a yogurt and dip with a yogurt and have a reward chart and blah, blah, all of this will work and help. And it didn't. It would put her off eating her tea at the time, or her only meal, because then she would avoid food. If she was too tired, she wouldn't eat. If something else smelt in the house, she wouldn't eat, so yeah. Anyway, I thought she got diagnosed with ARFID then by the dietitians, and they said, we can't help, even though we've been trained on ARFID, we're going to refer you into CAMS. They referred us into CAMS. I'm thinking CAMS are going to fix all my problems and help me as a parent, us as parents. And they said, we can't help. She's not old enough yet. I think they said she got to be 8. Don't worry, we're going to refer you into Reach for Wellbeing. They deal with younger children. You're going to get the help. So I'm waiting again for this other appointment to come along. And they said, we can't help. She's autistic. Our interventions don't work on autistic children. And yeah, that's when we found out about the feeding trust, and through this, we went on a pathway then waiting for some support from the feeding trust and the NHS to fund it. Okay, so I thought she had ARFID because obviously the dietitians then all started agreeing with me, yes, it's ARFID. And when she's been under a paediatrician since she was 1, so every time you go and see the paediatrician, they send notes to your GP, and everything was saying, with her other diagnosis, it just automatically started saying ARFID. And then it was only when we got referred to the Feeding Trust and we started having interventions with the Feeding Trust that they started talking to me about paediatric feeding disorder. And at first it was like, don't take ARFID away. It is ARFID. But then you learn about what paediatric feeding disorder is, and then it all makes sense, because how can a child, a baby that is struggling to eat, have ARFID? They can't. It's not the case. And I know that they've talked to me about other babies being very young, being referred to them with, saying this baby's probably got ARFID because they're struggling to feed. It is all that thing that she was just struggling to learn how to feed. And then obviously the uncomfortable feeling of having, acid reflux and things like that became uncomfortable. And that was how she associated eating. So it's just made me realise actually all along she had paediatric feeding disorder. Obviously, because she's got a bit older now and nearly 8, her mind started to change a little bit. But the Feeding Trust really believe that their interventions are working, and I am seeing that. And I think that we did get Francesca at the right time. And I think even if a child has got a diagnosis of ARFID because they're that bit older, I still believe that the interventions around the paediatric feeding disorder therapies will work anyway. So, but it was very, enlightening to start understanding a little bit more. It also makes me want to really shout out a little bit more, because obviously we went down a pathway of going from one to the other to the other. You know, it's hard to explain it all in a short video clip, but actually quite often I felt like we was going to get help from different people all along, and the people who you think you're going to get help from, your GP, your health visitor, I didn't get it. And actually early on, I should have got that it could be pediatric feeding disorder, but let's look at what we can do to help you. You know, we don't want it to turn into pediatric feeding disorder, but early on, Francesca's presenting with some of these symptoms, and you know, this is what we could do. So, you know, when I look back, and I just wish that somebody could have given me that support early on. Yeah, so and you know, just knowing a little bit more early on as well.
Thank you, Lisa. That's really, really interesting. It's really interesting to hear about RFID and the kind of like connection with PFD and that kind of thing. But also, it's really interesting to hear about your experiences with the NHS and consultants. So I think that leads on to another really important question, which is, I mean, it doesn't sound like there was a lot of awareness around that when you were seeking help. So I guess my question is kind of, what do you think is the biggest barrier to for parents to kind of get a diagnosis of PFD or even go down that pathway? Is there a kind of lack of awareness in the NHS, and if so, kind of what do you think is that down to?
Yeah, I think now RFID has been on the news a lot, hasn't it? It's been on, it's all over social media. The Big Eating Disorder charity have just covered it as part of Eating Disorder Awareness Week. So lots of people, just like I was, are coming to the conclusion that their child or themselves have got RFID. I mean, I'm sure, you know, older adults that struggle with their eating, you know, they've definitely got RFID, but the younger ones with the 1 and 2 and 3 year olds that are struggling with the same sort of patterns as like Francesca did, you know, or some of them, you know, are struggling with tube feeding and stuff. They need to be looking at the pediatric feeding disorder route first, because obviously they don't want to be going down the same route we did. We've been referred from one place to another, and they'll be rejected just like Francesca was. So they're all, I mean, I speak to parents and they're saying, we're waiting for this hospital to give us the funding, we're waiting for this hospital. And I've done exactly the same. You know, I've waited for a London hospital to approve Francesca's, and they all do this, you know, rejecting because it's not the right referral route. So I think I would love to see pediatric feeding disorder talked about. I would love it that if GPs did mandatory training. I've sent my GP the training that I see that's been offered. Also, you know, the training about RFID as well, just as much because they're still going to have their patients that have got RFID diagnosis, but it's that younger interventions, prevention that needs to happen across the NHS so that they don't have the difficulties that we faced. When I just wish that if I'd have had the interventions early on, it makes me think, where would we be now? And eating issues like absolutely massively affect my daughter's life, and they also massively affect our lives, that we have to think we can't even go out on a day trip all day because there is nothing she will eat. There is nothing that she will eat as a snack food. We have to physically come home or physically go back to a hotel, or, you know, we had a caravan, we used to take her back to the caravan. And then it's that thing of when she's not well, her food smells and tastes different. She's not going to eat it. She doesn't take medication. And last year she got seriously ill. And it, in a way, it just makes me a little bit heartbroken that we're knowing about this now, and yet we're not fixing it soon enough that other parents and children don't face the same issues that we faced. Francesca didn't eat for 8 days last year. She lost a significant amount of weight. It affects her personality. It did for a while, and it also affected her education. So it's all those other things that come into it that people don't understand. So yeah, I really want GPs and paediatricians. A paediatrician, when she was seriously ill, offered her a lollipop, you know, if she would take her medication, not realizing that just the taste she can't cope with something new. I mean, even the dentist yesterday went to put fluoride into her mouth on a cotton wool piece, and I went, oh, that she would never have gone to the dentist again if I wasn't stood there watching. I mean, it's on her notes. If I wasn't stood there watching, that fluoride would have gone in her mouth. That would have been scarier than if they'd have gone in with a needle. Francesca can cope with a needle. She can't cope with a new taste, So yeah, I'd like even the dentist can do the awareness, because
Yes.
She was like really shocked when I said that to her. So the more people that do that awareness, the better it is for our children. So
That's amazing. That's a really, really great way of putting it. I think that's so true. It's so, so true. And I think, that leads us on to another question, which really is important as well. Have you encountered, many misconceptions around kind of PFD? And if you have, how do you go about educating people on kind of Francesca's feeding difficulties and her PFD?
I think misconceptions as in, what other people think. Is that what you mean about, that people think if they looked after her for a week, they'd get her
Definitely.
eating? Yeah. That definitely people will always think that. And to be honest, I don't know if I would have thought that. I think unless you live and breathe it, it's hard to understand. It's hard to describe. I mean, when she wasn't eating for those 8 days, I was reaching out to everywhere, even send groups and other parents with autistic children, and saying, what can I do? How can I get her to take medicine? Has anybody got any tips? And they were saying, put it in a glass of orange juice. It's like, doesn't drink orange juice, drinks water. How can I put antibiotics in water? And nobody had got any strategies. Nobody. I was reaching out to everywhere, autism groups, national, the National Autism Society, Autism West Midlands. They're amazing, but actually they hadn't got the advice for me. So yeah, it's that thing of there's lots of misconceptions, and I just hope that parents out there can get the support they need, learn a little bit on, if they learn online, they reach out to the Feeding Trust, look at the resources that are available. And there are little things that you can do even without a professional's help. You can look and learn and think, right, we're just going to explore food in a safe way and a fun way. And, there are stuff that you can do earlier on. And I wish I'd have known them.
So, just going back and thinking, if you could talk to a parent now who is kind of at the beginning of their journey with their child with feeding difficulties, or who suspect that the child has PFD, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I think I'd say look at the Feeding Trust website. They've got a really, really good website. I know that they've made it more accessible for parents. So look at the resources on there. Have a conversation with your GP. See what support is out there. If your child's at nursery, ask the nursery what can they do to help. I know Francesca's nursery that she was in at the time, but she went into lockdown and then there wasn't allowed to touch or do things with food, did do lots of food exploring. So we've dried pastas and, all sorts of different things. But Francesca didn't get that opportunity. So ask your nurseries what could they do to support your child. And if I could turn back the clock now, and as soon as I found out about the Feeding Trust, instead of battling with the NHS, which I think it took 2 years to pay for the funding for the Feeding Trust, because at the time I thought I was worried about paying for it myself, even though I could have paid for it in instalments, in case it didn't work, because I felt like everything I tried at home didn't work. So it was that thing is it worth it? And actually now I wish everything that I could turn back the clock and I could have paid for it earlier on. Even, you know, there's different support that you can tap into, you know, even online. But if I could turn back the clock, I wish I'd have paid for stuff off my own back, and seen what happened and seen what the results was. Francesca now, you know, she didn't start till she was 7 years old, so already she's learned some more awkward habits, and it had sunk into her mind a little bit more about the things that she was doing. So yeah, if I and she's progressing so well with the feeding trust, and the interventions are working so well. And you know, she surprises me daily at the moment, to the point that we've always made cakes. She loved making cakes, and now she's licking the mixture off the stirrer, and it's just, but she does it all off her own back, because we do food play, and we play, you know, food exploring. There's no pressure there. She does it off her own back. At the moment now, she started eating all the sprinkles, all different colours. She's never ate anything that, you know, apart from back in the day when she ate bright coloured pasta stars. But for years and years, it's been white boiled rice, toast, you know, crackers. That's it. So it's all very beige. And now it's red sprinkles, green sprinkles, and it all just goes in. And I just sit there in awe of her, to the point that the other day she came back home from school and told me that she'd ate a buttercup. And I was like, wow, why did you eat a buttercup? She said, because my friend said it tasted of butter, and I love butter. And I said, what did it taste like? She went, absolutely nothing. And I was like, wow. And I gave her a star, because she likes having little stars for things. And I was just like, that's amazing, you know, that you'd even try it. And so, yeah, it's just, there's that thing of she's realizing things are safer, that she can try and she can taste. So yeah, it's other parents, you know, try some of the support that's out there, and you know, even if you have to pay. But you know, yeah, if you can't afford to pay, challenge your GP and fight your child's battle, you know, and push and push and push. But I think if they're younger and they've got the same sort of story as Francesca's, of feeding from a baby has been difficult, I would definitely say the paediatric feeding disorder. I think if something's happened as they've got older, and it's been, you know, a negative experience about choking or being sick, maybe as they've got 2 or 3 years old, then it might be different. But I'd say if it's been from a baby and that always has been present, you know, definitely look down the paediatric feeding disorder route first and see what support's available.
That's great, Lisa. That's great. And I think, like you say as well, you know, accessing the Feeding Trust website, where they've got lots of kind of general information on PFD and stuff, is also really good. But I think it's really interesting to hear. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for your time. So I just guess finally, you might have touched on this a little bit already, but I guess just finally, kind of, what are your hopes for the future of kind of pediatric feeding disorder in terms of awareness and treatment and support? What do you really kind of hope is going to happen going forward?
I hope that the NHS put money into this, because they have to, because otherwise, you know, it costs them more money in the long run with the interventions they have to put in place with a child that's struggling. And then, you know, if people would say to me, Francesca will grow out of it. I know another parent that told me the same story, and their daughter is, you know, older, in her 20s now, and actually it never got better. It turned into anorexia. So, you know, you can't say a child will grow out of it. It can become worse. So it's early intervention. They need to start with health visitors. They need to start with GPs. And it's those, give parents early on the support that they need. The most important thing you have to do as a parent when your baby is young is just feed them, isn't it? You know, feeding them, keeping them clean. But, you know, if you can't feed your baby, you feel like a failure. You completely feel like a failure. And it's that thing of, you expect the health visitor to give you that support. And they were like, we can't help. It's a medical problem. I mean, you know, when I look back, I mean, I wish I'd have said, if you can't help, it's a medical problem. Tell me who can help me. You know, people should not get fobbed off. And I'm lucky that actually, you know, I've got I've got my husband, I've got a really supportive family. Not everybody's got that you know, support. You know, if I was struggling with lack of sleep and things like that, you know, somebody helped me. Not everybody's got that. So you just worry of parents, you know, also the stress on the parent, it affects me. You know, it's made me have health problems. So then you've got to look at it as long term in the NHS. If they don't fix it early on and help things early on, you've got to sort out the parent, the mom. You know, it can have a knock-on effect on you know, fathers, siblings, everybody, can't it? You know, sibling. I know, I hear that people, you're on mute. I hear that people have got, you know, other siblings, and then they're watching the older child and they're copying them, and then they're struggling with their eating, you know, probably not as severe, but it's a massive knock-on effect, which costs the NHS more money in the long run. So, you know, they need to put the resources early on. So
And I
that's
think
what I'd
that's,
like
I
to see.
mean, yeah, that's really good. And I think, you know, the same thing. And Lucas had a nose tube, obviously, so, you know, Amelia, I remember her coming downstairs with the nose tube kind of on her face. You know, there's a lot kind of going on, and you're focusing on child. But, you know, if you can't feed your child, I feel that your family doesn't function, you know,
Yeah,
in the way that it needs to, for everyone to stay kind of emotionally healthy or physically healthy. You know, it's really difficult. So I think that's a really important point as well.
yeah.
But that's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story, Francesca. You've made some really important points, which I think, and also sharing your story is really great for other people and other parents to see, so they can kind of understand a little bit more. I think sometimes when you hear words like pediatric feeding disorder, it can seem really kind of mysterious and big, but I think you've really kind of shared your story to kind of, you know, unlock some of the kind of mystery and around it, which is really good. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It was lovely to meet you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Take care. Thanks,
Thank
Lisa.
you. Bye.